But sometimes you're searching for that kind of sane voice that
Hmm.
you resonate with. You go, okay, that makes sense. I like
Yeah.
that. That makes sense. And that's what I saw with you.
That forced me to think about like, why do I care about this issue so much? It's really because it transcends. So it's not just about aliens. It's not just about non-human intelligence, whatever you want to call it. There's something that affects all of us as human beings when it could lead to a scientific revolution. I had been involved like tangentially in much less serious inspector general investigations, and for it to be referred to Congress is unheard of. And so like I recognized its importance like within a few minutes, and I started texting all my friends and family, and they were like, there's Greg with his crazy ideas again. Like I didn't get taken seriously. It's obvious to me and you, I think, that like the scientific breakthroughs that could come from this, this could lead to if you just go from A to B to C, like if what Grush is saying is true, then that means that there is some alternative power source that we don't yet understand or has not yet been released for mainstream scientific research. So it could mean that there's unlimited clean energy that could be available to us, or room temperature superconductors, which would be important for quantum computing. We're all just kind of getting pushed along, down this river. And I would just encourage people like to not be resentful and not be angry online about it, just because you get likes and you get follows, because it doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. It doesn't help advance disclosure. It only helps yourself get attention. And if that's how you want to spend your time, okay. But like I would hope that people have a little bit more, a little bit of a higher calling.
Today, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing somebody whose writing has absolutely stopped me in my tracks, Greg Scaduto. Greg is without question one of the most compelling and thoughtful writers I've come across. His voice, equal parts lyrical, grounded, and incisive, brings rare clarity to complex and often overlooked subjects. Through his Substack and recent open letter that struck a deep chord with many in the UAP community, Greg has emerged as a deeply engaged and eloquent voice in the UFO UAP conversation. His ability to cut through noise with sincerity and insight is exactly why I wanted to share him and his thinking with all of you here on the UAP Files podcast. So, without further ado, the following is a conversation with Greg Scaduto. Greg, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate your time. And if it's okay, I'd like to just get a bit of an idea, first of all, about your kind of introduction into the writing world, really. I mean, that's how I first spotted you and read some of your writing and some of your posts and your Substack. And I'm sort of keen to know where that started.
Yeah, well, first off, Jimmy, I just want to say thank you for thinking of me and for having me on your show. It really means a lot to me that you invited me. This is a very meaningful topic to me. And I have been looking at your podcast. I've been listening. It's not just the guests that you bring on, but it's how you host. You have a very calm, kind of grounded way about you. You don't chase spectacle. I get the sense that you're chasing clarity. And so I really appreciate that. And it's a topic that's so easy to sensationalize. And I think you're a sane voice here, and I just appreciate what you're doing. But yeah, with writing, I always liked writing. It's something my teachers, in school would always say. I was never great at the science and math stuff, but the one thing my English teachers would always say is that you're a pretty good writer. You should continue to develop that, and it's something I always wanted to do. And I think I just didn't have something that I was passionate about, or I felt was meaningful enough for me to spend my time when I'm raising a family and working a pretty demanding job. And when the article came out in the debrief, June 5th, 2023, and I saw it, it kind of struck me as profound, and the silence was profound. And I just started to write. And one day I just created an X account and I posted something, and that's kind of what started.
Yeah. And so from there, you've moved on to Substack as well. And do you, what, how do you sort of decide on what you're right? I know that we'll come on to the sort of UAP stuff in a bit, but how do you
Mhm.
decide? I know that some of your other writing has been about different subjects. Is it just something that sort of grabs you or grips you and
Yeah.
that you feel as if
I
you
just
need
I
to
have
sort
to
of,
feel something. I think like I have to feel something on an emotional level, and I think I noticed that part of it comes from like so. one of my sons is on the spectrum. He's nonverbal. He's on the autism spectrum, and he really can't speak. And I find myself sensitive to that, like when someone is not being heard, to speak on their behalf. Because one of the things I've enjoyed in my life is when you get out of the military in this country, they kind of roll out the red carpet for you, and you have access to good jobs, and you kind of get listened to. And I spent time at an investment bank, and went to another job after that, and I felt like I was kind of given deference at times that was undeserved, and I had kind of imposter syndrome, I guess, where like, why do I feel like people are kind of looking at me and asking me instead of the person over there in the corner who's not saying much. And I realized at some point that maybe my job in a lot of those situations is to speak on behalf of other people who aren't being heard, and that kind of got reinforced when I had a son who couldn't speak for himself. So I think that's where my writing comes from. Maybe you saw the piece on the Uyghur genocide, or and I'm working on a few more that are like that from groups that are not heard in the mainstream media very much. So that's kind of what I'm most interested in.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you can sense the passion. I mean, it's I read a lot. I spend a lot of time on X. I spend a lot of time on Instagram. I just spend a lot of time on social media,
Don't we
really,
all? Don't we
just a
all?
ton of time, and
Yeah.
very deep into the UFO UAP subject, obviously. But you hear so many different opinions, and the way that people communicate doesn't really resonate with me
No.
much.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, speculation, it's, the UFO subject, isn't it? It's a lot of it is speculation. A lot of it is quite sensational sounding, but sometimes you're searching for that kind of sane voice that
Hmm.
you resonate with. You go, okay, that makes sense. I like
Yeah.
that. That makes it. And that's what I saw with you. So I really wanted to have that sort of conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think I'll just hover on that point for a second. I mean, I think most people completely miss the point on this topic. Um, and I remember telling one of my friends, and I was kind of giving him this impassioned diatribe, like, UAP Disclosure Act, and, mentions non-human intelligence 22 times, and just Google it. And, he just said, Greg, like, even if it's all true, like, you still got to go to work on Monday, don't you? And I thought about that, forced me to think about, like, why do I care about this issue so much? It's really because it transcends. So it's not just about aliens. It's not just about non-human intelligence, whatever you want to call it. There's something that affects all of us as human beings when it could lead to a scientific revolution, as profound as quantum theory or relativity. When you have propulsion, you have energy, you have materials that even our understanding of, even our understanding of consciousness could change from this. That's something that affects all of humanity and affects every facet of our society. And I think that's a point that's missed in the sensationalism that you see online. There's just kind of a hyper focus on individual cases or video clips or what one person said or didn't say. And I'm not interested in speculation. I'm interested in what David Grush is saying and what's being said in Congress and what lawmakers are saying or not saying, because I think it all has profound implications for humanity. So I think that's the point, and that's what's being lost. And I think that's what you're saying, which is that people, what they're saying online a lot of the times doesn't resonate with you.
yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, and I see a lot of people in this sort of um into UFO research community fighting, and one person
Hmm.
saying something about somebody else and don't trust this person. And I mean, it's such a distraction, but
Yeah,
it's so popular, and the algorithm, because it's popular, shows it to you more and more.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
do find that I'm scrolling through and I'm seeing, oh, that person's talking about that person. They said that this. I'm like, I don't care, but why do you keep
yeah.
showing
It's
me
the
this?
algorithm. The algorithm rewards conflict
Yeah.
and sensationalism, and and it's always that early comment, that says something offensive or says something hateful or just attention grabbing, and that's patient zero, right? And then the contagion just spreads from there, and then by the time somebody tries to say something rational, it's already drowned out.
Yeah.
And that's the social media effect. That's it's just unfortunate, and that's why it's still important to read books and to get to be interested in other primary sources and secondary sources because there's a one of the things that surprised me when I first started looking into this is there's just tomes of material out there, books written, people who have thought about this, serious thinkers who have thought about this, and there's just so much out there that's important that's not on social media. So Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I had this conversation with Paola Harris. Paola Harris, I think it is. I'm terrible getting that wrong. But she's been a researcher for many, many, many years.
Hmm.
Paola Harris. Paola Harris.
Paula, yeah.
Yeah. But no, we had this conversation. It's in the books. Just read the books. I'm thinking, okay, but I remember thinking at the time, there's the new generation that are coming into this subject are less inclined to read books, more
They don't.
inclined to,
Yeah.
to
And
jump on social
like you're
media.
a
And
millennial, right? Or
42.
oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
You look younger. So yeah, I mean, so you get it. I mean, we had to read, I don't know if you read the Scarlet Letter over the overseas, like in the UK, or like books like, that require sustained attention, and you have to read it and understand it well enough to write a 5-page essay on it. And I was maybe like one of the last generations that had to do that. But, everybody has smartphones now. I didn't have a smartphone when I was in school, but it's shattered their dopamine receptors. The attention span is just not there. And so that prevents people from really interrogating something that is very complex and very profound and multifaceted and interdisciplinary, because and that's something that is lost on a lot of people. There's vertical silos in science. You don't have the astronomer talking to somebody in material science, talking to the chemist, talking to all these different disciplines, and that's what makes the phenomenon so confounding, is that you don't have the crosstalk. You have people who want to get tenure and want to get published and want to be respected. And that's why, when you have organizations like Soul Foundation is bringing people together so there can be that dialogue and exchange of ideas. That's why those kinds of organizations are so important. But yeah, it's lost on a lot of people. I agree with you.
Yeah, completely, completely.
Mhm.
And I think it's so exciting. I think when we look at Soul Foundation and Galileo Project, like non-government, non-military or intelligence
Yeah,
services
yeah,
getting involved in this subject, and we're going to take a scientific approach to this. It's
yeah, because it's
fantastic.
independent. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, fantastic, and
yeah.
it's really exciting. But I guess my point is really it would be not, or my message perhaps is that it would be great if any of those people, perhaps those listening, that spend so much time and energy and focus on that sort of infighting and arguing, if you just sort of work together on stuff and
Yeah.
research together and put it to some sort of positive use, that
And
would
most
make
people
a
are
big
very
difference.
egocentric, and they're thinking in terms of their own ego and not what it means for humanity. I mean, it's obvious to me and you, I think, that like the scientific breakthroughs that could come from this, this could lead to, if you just go from A to B to C, like if what Grush is saying is true, then that means that there is some alternative power source that we don't yet understand, or has not yet been released for mainstream scientific research. So it could mean that there's unlimited clean energy that could be available to us, or room temperature superconductors, which would be important for quantum computing, which is important for all kinds of things. That's basically the bottleneck for like simulations and understanding molecular interactions, and it could lead to all kinds of scientific breakthroughs, advanced propulsion. You could have cheaper food. You could basically end scarcity on this planet if what they're saying is true. And there's this technology that's squirreled away at defense contractors and DoD and agencies and organizations and private defense contractors that are focused on weaponizing it. And that's what makes the issue so important. It's not just curiosity. Yeah, we're all curious, but it has those implications, and that's why I've become so interested in it. Yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so frustrating and hard to understand why other people don't have that same passion for it. Because you think, well, look, if that, let's think of two different scenarios here. One is that David Grush is correct, telling the truth, correct, and what he's saying is happening. And if that's true, as you say, this could be absolutely incredible and profound for our species,
yeah,
and just as a father for our children, the next
hmm
generation, it could be incredible, and obviously for our neighbors and people all around the world. So that's one part, and the second part is if what he's saying is correct, but that it's not non-human intelligence or alien extraterrestrial, for example. If you go with that theory, then it's still taxpayers' money being spent on black projects that's
yeah.
beyond.
It's a crisis of democracy. I mean,
Yeah,
we
so
have
that
we have a representative democracy in the United States. So you're paying taxes. Like look at your pay stub and how much you're paying in taxes, and you elect representatives to be stewards of your taxpayer funds, uh, so that they can help you and your neighbors. Um, and it's always been that's one of the things that's been mystifying to me is that nobody seems to be that interested in that. That amount of waste that's happening. And when you look at this is something I brought up on social media a lot, which is the failed audits. There's been 7 failed audits from the DoD. The first time they started doing it was in 2017 in December. I don't know if it's a coincidence. If it's this, like it coincided with the Leslie Kean, Ralph Blumenthal, bombshell article about the Nimitz incident and everything. But that was when the first audit occurred, and they failed every single one of them. And they're the only agency in the U.S. government that has failed, or the only department of the executive branch that's failed every single audit. So you have to ask yourself, like, well, what does that mean for our democracy? But it's not talked about much. So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
you're spot on, and that's that's why it's such a it's. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can't see that, David Grush standing there with his hand up in Congress and making
Mhm.
these incredible claims, and then
Yeah,
people just sort of move on to the next thing. Well, hang on a minute, we've got this. Let's
yeah.
look into that and really, really dig deep into this to get this resolved first
Hmm.
and find out exactly what's happening
Well,
there.
he said, I have a list. I mean, this quote always stands out. I mean, I have a list of cooperative and hostile witnesses. So has anyone gone down the list and subpoenaed the ones who wouldn't come in and then inspected the facilities and, used counterintelligence methods to find out what was going on? Or did they just do what Arrow did, which was they asked defense contractors, hey, do you have any non-human technology? No. Okay, let's move on. That's not a serious investigation. And there's a conflict of interest when you have an agency within the Department of Defense investigating itself. It's so
Yeah,
obvious. It would be funny if it wasn't so serious.
yeah,
So,
yeah. It's
yeah,
just it's just so blatant, isn't it? I made this I had this conversation with I think Tom Vernon, who does a lot of co-hosting with me on the podcast, and we said like imagine if this was a police investigation into I don't know,
yeah, yeah,
a serious assault or something. You just phoned up the suspect and said, "Did you
yeah,
are you responsible for punching, for causing significant harm to this person?" No, no, not me. Okay, thanks. But
yeah.
that's not an
And then instead of trying
investigation.
to get a warrant, which is the analog to the UAP Disclosure Act, instead of getting that warrant, you just say that there's no evidence because
Mm.
you never got the warrant to search the house. I mean, it just defies common sense. And any lawyer or uh, anyone who has oversight in Congress like should know that. But the taxpayer, like their constituents, don't care about it, so they're not incentivized to care about it. There are some who care about it, but most of them don't. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah, this is wild, really wild when when you take a step back, and I think because a lot of people don't because we look at this subject and we're interested in this subject
Mhm.
and we follow it, and I think when you realize a lot of people don't, and you try and explain this to people, and they're like, wow, really? Like, yeah, really, this is genuinely happening. This is how it's happening, and it's in broad daylight.
I'm just going to give you an analogy that somebody said to me that I thought was useful. And maybe some of your listeners will think it's useful, but think of a dollar bill. I don't know. Have you ever heard this analogy? Like a
No,
dollar
I don't
bill?
think
Like,
so.
okay, so a dollar bill has value because human consciousness assigns meaning to it. It's like a dollar bill. Physically, it's just paper and ink, right? But socially, it's very powerful. You can exchange it for food and for shelter and for energy and surgery and whatever else. Uh, but that's only because people agree on what it means. So its value doesn't come from the physical, the atoms it's composed of, but it comes from collective human belief embedded in systems. And so that kind of helped me understand like why nothing's happening with the UAP phenomenon. It's real because it changes behavior, and it's not because it's made of something that's valuable. So uh,
Yeah.
that kind of is and there's philosophical precepts for that. Like and there's if you have listeners who are academics, like there's social constructivism, which says that reality is partly shaped by mental frameworks. So the dollar isn't worth anything inherently. Its value is intersubjective. It's created and maintained by a collective belief system backed by authority. And then there's phenomenology, which says our perception is always colored by intentionality. So we see a dollar not as cellulose, but we see it as buying power. We see it as buying something that is of value to you. Uh, so that is, I think, we're increasingly talking about consciousness being a component of this, and I think it's maybe not as mystical as people think. It's not going to become an issue that's prioritized until there's a collective understanding of its importance.
Yeah, yeah, profound. Absolutely. Okay, so let's jump into this Wall Street Journal article then. What's I mean I've been I've been milling over it over the last couple of days, and I've kind of got an idea of what I think, and I know that other people have sort of put some things out with their thoughts on it. What are your thoughts on this article that's come out with? I'm assuming Sean Kirkpatrick and Suzanne Go involved in the sort of release of information, or certainly
Hmm.
talking to the journalists. Tim Phillips, I know, recently spoke to Stephen Greenstreet, and I'm no doubt he's probably a source in that as well. So these are sort of the Arrow guys, aren't they? The guys that
Yeah,
were involved in running Arrow, and
yeah.
certainly the narrative that comes out of Narrow and sorry Arrow, but they seem to still be the voice of Arrow, even though they're neither of them are
Yeah, I mean,
Tim.
they've moved on, but he went on a kind of a podcast circuit, and
Yeah,
that was kind of puzzling. Like it was as if he had to, like, I don't know what was compelling him to do all that. I think if he just wanted to move on with his life, he would just move on. But yeah,
yeah. Yeah, well, that was the comment, wasn't it? Like I've kind of put into this position. I didn't really want it, and it's caused me some problems, and people have come after me, and I'd like to just put it to bed. And now I'm
yeah,
going to go and do 55 interviews about it, even if
yeah.
it's
I
like,
mean, and if
okay,
some of your listeners don't know, like, so the, the critique, the big critique, or the suspicion is that Arrow was just acting as a fly trap for whistleblowers to run interference and uh, to prevent claims of encounters or claims of experiences with non-human intelligence or UAPs, UAP reports from pilots from actually being investigated. And they released this 63-page report. It omitted key cases. It was a disaster. So it omitted the most important case probably, which was the 2004 Nimitz incident and also the 2013 through 15 Virginia Beach incident. There were basic factual errors like mislabeling, where Howard Reed was from. There was just a dismissive tone throughout. It really read like a Kirkpatrick op-ed, I thought. It ignored whistleblower testimony. It just, like we just talked about, they just asked defense contractors if they had alien craft, and when they were told no, they just moved on. There were no subpoenas, there were no inspections, there were no audits. Uh, and so there's just a massive conflict of interest. And just the language framing too, like they use the word space aliens. That's
yeah,
not a serious term used in any field of human endeavor in 2024 or 2025. That is a rhetorical device meant to silence and to ridicule. So it's very dishonest. So I just wanted to give everyone a summary
yeah.
of
No,
that.
no, you
Uh,
summarized it perfectly. It's my thoughts
yeah.
exactly. And yeah, I spoke to Sean Kirkpatrick. I had a few conversations with him. We were
Oh, really? I
sort of
didn't know.
yeah, we were exchanging communication. Well, not on the podcast, but we were exchanging
Mm,
communications via email. So I'd asked him to come on the podcast. I thought, well, look, there's a slim chance, but maybe he might come on the
mm,
podcast and speak to somebody. He's going on lots of other podcasts, or not podcasts, but well, actually a couple, yeah. But giving lots of interviews. So I thought perhaps he might come on mine. But he wouldn't. But he would communicate with me behind the scenes, and I asked him why certain cases weren't in the Arrow Historical Report, Volume 1, or Review Report, Volume 1. And for example, the Phoenix Lights, I mentioned that case because it's such a significant case. Lots of people had seen it. Why wasn't that in the first one, for example? And I think I mentioned the Nimitz case. And so essentially his response was, we are we're looking at cases that are of most interest to Congress. And I'm thinking, how surely that is. I mean, that's such a significant case, and I posted those. I think I posted those comments, communications backwards and forwards with Sean on X some time back. But I remember thinking to myself at one point, okay, you're not prepared to come on my podcast, but yet why are you still talking to me? Like you're in demand.
He's
You're
trying to plant a seed kind of, or yeah,
yeah,
yeah, a narrative,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That's kind of how it started to feel after a while, and same with Suzanne Go. I'm thinking I'm just some guy that's podcasting from his spare
Oh,
room
so
in.
what did you have interaction with
Yeah,
Susan Go?
yeah, Susan Go. So I sent emails through to the DoD, I guess press office, public affairs office.
Wow, you've been doing a lot of
Mhm.
work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, whenever I had a question, I thought, well, I mean, that's just
Yeah,
my thing, really. If you don't
yeah,
ask, you don't get.
yeah.
And I'm quite a persistent person, but I sent her an email and just asked questions. Things had come up on Twitter, on X, and I thought, well, why don't I just ask them? And she would come back to me, and I had numerous responses from her. And it was only when, so I'll explain why so we'll go into this now. It stopped. All of the communication stopped with Sean Kirkpatrick and with Suzanne Go around about the same time, which is about 3 or 4 months ago. And the last thing that I asked Suzanne Go was how many full-time and part-time members of staff worked in the UAP task force, because I saw that Stephen Greenstreet from the New York Post had said very confidently on X that there were only, I forget how many he said now, like 2 or 3 full-time people that were working in it. It was a very small kind of outfit. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
well, there's only one way he would know that. He's gone directly
Yeah.
to the Pentagon's press office essentially and asked. And it transpires that Suzanne, she deals with all of the UFO, UAP related questions on behalf of the Pentagon. So they all come to her and she gives the responses. That's in my experience and from what I've heard. And sure enough, I didn't contact her directly, but she responded to me to the question that had originally been sent to the DoD's press office. And she said, "I'll come back to you on that." Nothing for a couple of weeks. I chased her up. Any update? Again, nothing. She's like, "Yeah, I'm still looking into it. This takes time." And so there are a few messages backwards and forwards, essentially saying it's going to take some time. And then from last 3 or 4, 5, maybe nothing, no response from her at all, no response from Sean Kirkpatrick. I mean, he was answering all sorts of questions. I'd asked him if he'd had any investments in Enigma. I'd heard that he was in some
Mhm.
way linked to Enigma Labs, a good few months ago. And I know that's resurfaced again more recently. But he's like, no, absolutely not. And I published that on my X account a few days ago. And that was from a few months back. But yeah, so it seems as if they were prepared to have these conversations and talk about things they'd want to talk about, but then when it comes to other things, it's like just dead silence. So it's sort of felt a little bit used. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't blame you. I mean, I would feel the same. And when I look at her statements, like the press releases that there've been, I mean, the language is Orwellian. You can tell it's deceptive. And I don't want to speculate because I don't. I'm just an interested citizen. Like, yeah, I did serve in the army and did all that, but I'm not privy to any insider information, so I don't want to malign anyone's character. But I can tell that that the language is deceptive because she says things like Arrow has no verifiable evidence. Like,
mm,
why do you feel the need to qualify evidence with verifiable? Why can't you just say there's no evidence? It implies that there's some evidence that can't be verified. So, like, what might that be, Susan?
yeah.
And the use again, the use of extraterrestrial. I think in all of her statements they use the word extraterrestrial. But if you listen to David Grush and to most of the whistleblowers, they don't use that word. They say non-human intelligence. And when I think it was Nancy Mace, Representative Nancy Mace, when she asked him, was it a spaceship? And he said, well, I guess you could think of it like that. Okay, so it's not a spaceship. It's something. It's coming from some other plane of existence. So and they really lean heavily into that kind of language, the extraterrestrial language. So like, that's why it seems so obviously deceptive. But I don't know what it is. I mean, the problem is we don't know what we don't know, and
Mm,
there's all different permutations of what this could be. There could be a threat, a threat from a foreign adversary, in addition to non-human intelligence, and we don't want a groundswell of public outrage to tip our hand into revealing that we don't have the same technology that China or Russia has. And so they're just trying to quell the interest in it, and they're actually acting in our best interest. And it could be, or they could be acting in bad faith, but I just don't know. And so that's why I stopped short of
yeah, yeah.
maligning anyone's character. But yeah, it doesn't feel good. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no, you
Yeah.
you 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 articulate it very well. I think I mean, human nature, it's likely to be, and this is just me putting my sort of research pieces together, like a jigsaw puzzle, I guess, and coming up with some kind of picture that feels right for me. And I
Mhm.
think that it's likely to be. I mean, I know that there's a big group of people that think, look, this is, they're evil and they just, they want society to, power and influence, all that sort of stuff. But I think that it's likely to be that most people are genuinely inherently good,
Mhm.
generally, and they probably think for some reason they probably think that they're doing it for the best. It's
Yeah.
probably for one reason or another, it's they're able to justify it to themselves that look, by doing this, it's for the best. And I just think, and I can understand, I'm sure that you could lay down multiple reasons why this would be the best outcome to, to lie to people or to obfuscate. But I think that at the core of this, and I think this is something that I can imagine, again, human nature, they're grappling with at the moment, is that there's almost a human right, or it feels like there should be a human right to know if you've got information about our place in the universe, what comes after death potentially, what's out there, if are we alone? These kind of really, really deep questions, it feels like a human right to know. And to keep that a secret is almost a breach of our human rights. And that's the kind of core feeling. So even if it's for the best, even if it's, well, we have to do this to keep our country safe or whatever, if you've got that information that could give us answers before we die, essentially, like, is it fair that I should pass on to whatever the next world is, or maybe nothing, whatever your thoughts are, without knowing what the meaning of life is? If there's something that gets us closer to the meaning of life, what's out there in the universe, uh,
Yeah.
that just seems unacceptable. It just seems
Yeah.
unacceptable. How could you have information and just let somebody just, off you go?
Yeah.
You're never going to know. You do have
Yeah. I mean,
rights.
I don't believe that everyone has the right to know uh, the truth about everything. I think that I definitely sympathize with what you're saying, and the problem is we don't know for what reason the information is being withheld, and it's what's troubling is that there are many obvious scenarios where the reasons would be not good. Like you have people, the global oligarchs who control uh, industries and bankroll politicians and elected representatives. You could easily see it being a scenario where the energy industry did not want this information to get out because everyone would have clean, free energy. And so they committed this crime against humanity by preventing the information from getting out. Um, but then your point is valid, which is, but why do we have to? What about stuff that doesn't involve energy, just our place in the cosmos? Like, why hide that from everyone? And the cynical view could be like, well, they don't want people to all of a sudden, like, you don't want society to collapse. You don't want the ontological framework that undergirds our reality to collapse, because then people all of a sudden decide, well, the president isn't in charge. My elected representatives aren't in charge. Why listen to them? So you could think of a lot of cynical reasons, but I think there's too many unknowns for me to give like a forceful opinion about
Mm.
it. But it doesn't feel good to know that somebody's in the know about what is this all for, and they're withholding it from us, especially when it could lead to a dramatic uh, reduction in human suffering. Like, and once you don't have energy scarcity anymore, like the incentive to go to war is dramatically diminished. In fact, the incentive for human cooperation becomes more important. So all that to say, like I said, I sympathize with what you're saying, and it feels like a betrayal.
Mm.
Um, but it's a complex, layered question that demands, I think, more information and more data. Um, so we just don't have enough information to make. I can't. I feel like I can't make like a categorical statement
No, no,
about
no.
the morality of it. Yeah.
No, I know, I understand, and we can only assess it in the way that our brains do, I suppose, and our thoughts. I mean, that's just
Mhm.
it's just a feeling and a thought. It's that mixture of what feels right, um, what feels right, and there's so much that goes into it. It's so complex, and I, as a, as I was saying, I can see that there would be lots of reasons why somebody would think it's in our interest. It's in our interest. We're doing it for the right reasons. We're protecting our people. I can understand there would be multiple different theories as to why that would make sense. And even if you were just, catapulted into that position, you might take that on as well, even from a position where perhaps where I am now, which is no, I feel as though we have a right to know. And it's same as, the Manhattan Project's like, yeah, we don't get to know how you make a nuclear weapon, but we need to know that
Yeah.
one exists. A
Yeah.
world-ending device exists. We sort of have a right to know that, not how
Well,
to
I'm going to
make it.
just say that like all of what you're saying is an argument for the UAP Disclosure Act because
Yeah.
it's designed to release the information in a responsible way. Um, and the thing that I could say like I think is egregious is that it didn't pass
Mm.
because that was designed by thoughtful people who many of whom are in the know uh, to have an advisory board to advise our government on what information could be released and what information should not be released, and do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize national security and doesn't cause social disorder. Um, and so the fact that that wasn't passed does seem authoritarian, and it seems like an injustice. So I think if there's one thing that like I hope that people will take away is like become interested in that legislation because there's something profound behind it, and it's kind of undergirding everything that you're saying. Uh, Perhaps we can release some of it, so let's do that. Well, the representatives who are bankrolled by the defense contractors like Mike Rogers and Mike Turner said no. Why is that? And I'm not saying that they're corrupt or that whoever else was involved in gutting the bill is corrupt, but like let's ask the question.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. At least
yeah,
ask the question. Yeah. You're
yeah.
quite right.
Do you have a view on like in the UK, like what are they not in Parliament? Are they not discussing it much? There's no interest. It's only in the
None.
US.
None
No.
whatsoever.
But people like when you talk to people like your social network about it in the UK, do you think that there's more interest in the US or the UK? I'm just curious.
Tons more in the US. Yeah,
Hmm.
we're very slow to catch up. We're basically America kind of 5 years later or 5 years behind. That's how it feels. We're the States 5 years behind, and we see that with all sorts of things from from culture and the media and the way that we communicate in the media and politicians, all that sort of stuff. We seem to be kind of catching up and then becoming where you guys are now, in
Yeah.
5 years' time. So, but the same goes for the UFO UAP subject. Like people are starting to do a couple of news stations are occasionally doing a story, and there's a couple of newspapers that have always done UFO stories, and they're quite lowbrow. They're not considered very respectable kind of news
Yeah.
outlets, and so people don't take it that seriously. These are the newspapers that would have had a ridiculous story on the front page, 20 years ago, and they still do now. So they're not really taken too seriously.
Yeah.
But when I talk to people, it often comes up in conversation because I do what I do, and when we kind of come around to what do you do in your spare time, and I sort of explain it, um, their response is, "Well, that's fascinating. I saw this thing when I was younger,
Yeah.
or my mum saw
It's
this." And
surprising how many people don't ridicule it. I mean, people do. Obviously, there's still a stigma, and it still happens. There's a organized, concerted stigma that seems to be coming from above. But like in normal conversation, when you talk about it, like, yeah, people are pretty
yeah,
open about it. Yeah.
yeah, it's so much more open than you would imagine now, and I think that there's always in the UK we're very there's a lot of humor in the way that we communicate with each other, and it's
Yeah.
it's kind of mocking but it's like in a loving way. We make
Yeah.
fun of each other, we call each other names, but it's coming from a place of love and friendship. So you'll always have a few jokes thrown in there, but then very quickly they'll say, "Yeah, but you know what? We're probably not alone, or but I believe this, or I think that's probably likely, or I saw this thing."
A lot of people have
And
had experiences too that, you wouldn't think, or, they just never talk
lots.
about it. Yeah.
Lots, yeah.
Yeah.
And they've either sort of pushed it away to the back of the head as probably something that's explainable. I just don't know how to explain it. Or other
Hmm.
people that have just had this experience that's profound and they've just accepted it over the years and don't really talk about it that much because it's just a part of their history. And I mean, I worked with a guy for many years, and it it took however many years, I mean, 3 or 4 years before we started talking about UFOs. And he'd had an experience where he'd seen a very large UFO in a field hovering above the crop above the crops and then just shoot up into the sky. I'm thinking like, this is an incredible, profound experience.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that was part of your life for like 3 or 4 years until we started talking about it. And you realized that I was open to it, and I realized you were open to it, and we were sharing very openly.
Yeah.
So I can
Well,
imagine
it's kind of like the
that's,
dollar bill again. Like if nobody sees any value in it, like why talk about it?
yeah,
It has to be, there has to be a shift in public consciousness. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Which I think is why it's so important to be talking about it and to write about it. And I think what you're doing is really important. And I feel like I've got a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, I don't know. I can't think of the word, but I feel like I have to. It's like a need. I'm interested in
Yeah.
this subject, but the only way really to push it forward is to just get stuck into research, get
And you
talking to
said you
people.
feel a need, and I just noticed that with a lot of people like us, is that there's this intuitive pull uh, that's telling you this is important,
Yeah.
and that it's hard to articulate, but you just kind of know.
Yeah.
Is that what it feels like?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
completely. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's not like it for me, it wasn't like an experience. I hadn't had an experience at all.
Me neither. Yeah,
I'd just seen some stuff, yeah, and
yeah,
just like yourself, well, hang on a minute, we should be taking this really seriously. This could be really profound. And then you think you mill that over, and you really think, well, somebody needs to. Who I'm just like
yeah.
everybody else. Why don't I? I should do something. Um, and then
Yeah, and I'll just say like that's commendable. Like you kind of put yourself down a second ago and said like, oh, I'm nowhere or nobody or something. But like I don't see many people like having this kind of calm, grounded, sane discussion about it. I see a lot of sensationalism and a lot of just a lot of rage on the internet. And so like I hope that you keep doing what you're doing and you keep having people on for these kinds of discussions because I think you do an excellent job like with the conversations and not letting it spiral out of control. So
yeah, I
I
appreciate
should
that.
pat
Well,
yourself
that's
on the back for that. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really kind of you to say. And you know what's interesting? I mean, perhaps this is a bit of an insight into people that have got podcasts and stuff, but the algorithm really incentivizes you to do that. It really
It
does
does. Yeah.
incentivize you to go, right, what you need to do is you need to go after that person, interview that person, and you need to frame it like this, and then you need to have this dramatic thing in a dramatic, description and dramatic thumbnail, all of these things that, and and I know, I could make a viral video tonight if I wanted to, because I know the structure of it, but then I would just die a little bit inside because,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
And,
and
and you have to listen to that. And there's no moral framework or system of ethics that says the more attention you get, the more moral you are, the better you are, the more
yeah,
you're good if you do this. And I feel the same thing that you do. That like when that debrief article came out and I read it and I saw the allegations, like the U.S. has recovered multiple, intact non-human craft, non-human biologics were recovered, deeply classified reverse engineering program. He was denied oversight. There were threats to silence insiders. Like I was appalled. And I looked at the deep. I was like, okay, it's a debrief. Is this some kind of fake publication? And I was like, okay, well, it's some kind of frontier science. Maybe it's not a tabloid. And then I looked up Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. I didn't actually know who they were at that time. But then I realized, okay, Blumenthal has been at the New York Times for 50 years, 50. And Leslie Kean was this serious investigative journalist. And then you look and you see the other outlets that report. It was reported in The Guardian. It was reported in NPR. So that means that his bona fides were verified. He is who he says he is, which was this GS-15 government employee with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And you're like, okay, this is a serious person. And like having been in the military, like you interact with some high-ranking people, and like these people are not prone to delusions and fantasy. They're just not. And like that's I think one of the reasons I knew that it was something meaningful. Like you don't have people test like you know I had been involved like tangentially in much less serious inspector general investigations, and for it to be referred to Congress is unheard of. And so like I recognized its importance like within a few minutes, and I started texting all my friends and family, and they were like, there's Greg with his crazy ideas again. Like I didn't get taken seriously. And I kind of walked around in like a little bit of a daze for like a long time because I couldn't figure out like why does nobody else care about this but me? Like and like nobody in my own life, like, and that was why I got on X, was because there was nobody in my waking life, in my physical life that cared about it. I couldn't find anyone to talk about it with. And it's a feeling of loneliness.
Mm.
Um, but I think not everyone is wired to think this way, and it's not really their fault that they're not interested in it, because everyone's brain's wired differently, and there's so much in life that we have no control over. Um, we're all just kind of getting pushed along, down this river. And I would just encourage people like to not be resentful and not be angry online about it, just because you get likes and you get follows, because it doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. It doesn't help advance disclosure. It only helps yourself get attention. And if that's how you want to spend your time, okay. But like I would hope that people have a little bit more, a little bit of a higher calling. And I think forgiveness is going to be important in this, like forgiving the debunkers, the McWests, because that's the only way we're going to figure this out as a society, is if we come together and stop berating people and criticizing, and stop with the "I told you so's." And there's historical lessons for that, like Abraham Lincoln, U.S. president during the Civil War. After the war was over, after hundreds of thousands of deaths, he said that if only 10% of the southern states agree to come back to the Union, we'll admit them. Just 10%, like not 50%, not 70%, not 100%, which was it was like radical forgiveness. And that's what allowed us to come back as one unified country, is because there wasn't that animosity. And so I hope people think about that when they're talking to debunkers, is they serve a purpose, actually, like, because if you don't ever question your own beliefs, then it just becomes dead dogma. And you should want to know why you believe what you believe, and the only way to exercise that muscle is to defend your views against the McWests and the Green Streets. And that's what you do in a free country. So I wish people could be more like you, is what I'm saying. It would make for a much healthier dialogue. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I really do. I wish people could be more like you. Um,
Yeah, and that's why
and
I try to keep writing, and like, yeah, it's like I write something, it gets follow, a few retweets or whatever, and it doesn't go viral. But I think eventually people will start to catch on of like what's happening, and they're going to look at work that you've done on the subject, and how you didn't, you weren't just spewing bile, you were trying to understand something. And it will eventually, as society gradually starts to accept what's happening as a real human experience that people are going through. It's not going to be, the sensationalists and the people spewing animosity that are elevated. It's going to be people like you, who I think were having real adult conversations about it. So
that was really kind of you. Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much. Well, this has been fascinating. I'm conscious of the time, Greg, and I'd love to stay in contact and maybe talk again in the not
yeah,
too distant future.
yeah, me too.
Um,
This was fun.
yeah, really, 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 really good talking to you. Real fun. Profound, man. Really profound. I love the way that you communicate. It's so rare. It's so rare. It really is. Just a really deep thought.
Ditto.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Well, let's stay in touch.
Definitely, definitely, Greg. We'll whack some details and descriptions so people can come and find you and look at your stuff. I think
Well, I really
encourage people
appreciate
to
that.
do
And
that.
thank you again for giving me this opportunity. It's not something I've ever done before. So I just really want to say thank you for thinking of me, and for, thinking my
Yeah,
writing was good enough to have me on and talk.
absolutely, man. It's my pleasure. My pleasure.
All righty.
Awesome.
Well, it's
Take care of
pretty late
yourself,
over
Greg.
there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Go
it's
get some
getting on.
sleep. All right.
Take
Bye
care,
bye.
man. Bye now. Bye.